Hello, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, hi, I'm Cassidy. If it's not, thanks for always tuning into my videos. Today we are doing my May wrap-up, also my Escape the Readathon wrap-up. Haven't done a wrap-up on my channel in a while. I really struggle with wrap-ups. I honestly really struggle with wrap-ups, but I'm here. I might bring them back. Don't know what's happening with them. I keep switching my plans for them like crazy, but here I am filming a wrap-up for May. The first couple books I read were for my dragon reading vlog. The first one I read was Ascendant by Michael R. Miller. I ended up giving this book a 3-star. I thought it was well written. I thought it was a modern take on the classic Boy and His Dragon tale. I liked the addition of food into the world. I liked the way the magic system worked in this. I liked the personalities of the dragon. I just am not the reader for the Boy and His Dragon type story. I find they have too much traveling, too much journeying, and it's just not for me. Like I just know that trope, the way it's often done, is just really not necessarily for me. And I think that if you like stories like that, like if you like Aragon, if you like Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill, try this one. I think that this is my favorite one I've read so far. I've read both of those. I thought there was some really, really interesting parts of this. This story follows Holt Cook, who is a cook, but he realizes that dragons have a fatal flaw. They don't like weakness in their kin, and he ends up saving one of the dragon eggs that would have been deemed weak, and then the dragon egg would have just been disposed of. So he ends up saving this dragon, and he ends up being bonded to a blind dragon. I think the blind rep was really good. I really had really good experiences within this book that made me want to give it a 3. It's just not my type of story. I highly will be recommending it to a lot of people though, especially those that are fans of Aragon. So definitely give this one a try. The next book that I read for that video was Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This book is literally everywhere. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, there's something in these spines, there's something in this edges, because this book was just so incredible. Like, I had so much fun with this book. This is not a book that's like, man, this is the most creative, I've never seen anything like this. This is a book full of familiar tropes, full of familiar writing styles, full of familiar techniques, full of things that you love, full of things you hate, but it's so familiar that you just eat it up and you have so much fun while reading it. I read this in one sitting. I couldn't put it down. I stayed up till 4 a.m. reading it. Like, I could not put this down. I loved it. This one follows our main character who ends up going to this dragon riding school. At the school, there's only one way out. Either you graduate or you die. You follow our main character who did not want to be in the riding academy. She wanted to be a scribe, but her mother, who is the big, strong military leader, forces her into it, and she has a family name to live up to. All of her siblings also were big, bad dragon riders. Our main character, Violet, has a health condition that challenges her at portions. Like, she has to overcome things because of her health, and I really liked the representation in this. I loved that it didn't just go away magically. I thought it was really well done. I really liked our main character. This is a fantasy romance. There is a good level of fantasy. Like, there is a lot of fantasy in this, but there is a romance, and the writing style is a little bit juvenile, but it is part of the reason I think that I loved it so much, because it had those YA characters. Like, YA characters that are just so easy to love and to follow and to root for, while having more adult themes and some of those adult discussions for me. Really liked that. The dragons, these are some of my favorite dragons I've ever read. They had their greatest personalities of dragons. I had such a win with this book, and I need more people to read it. Not that I need to hype it up, because it's been hyped so much already, but I cannot wait for the sequel. This is so much fun. So much fun. I loved this one. I hope you love it too. The next couple books I read was for my, like, if you liked this, then read this vlog, where I got 4 booktubers to give me a recommendation that was personalized based on a book I liked. Then please read this book. The first book I read, that video is out of order, just so you know. Welcome to insider knowledge. I put it in a way that I thought would flow nicer for the video, not the actual way that I read the books. The first book I read was We Need to Do Something. This was Lexi's pick, and I sadly didn't love this one in the end. I really liked the first 60%, but the ending let me down. In this story, we're following a family that is locked in a bathroom during a tornado, and weird stuff starts to happen. That's pretty much all I can tell you about this. The book is just weird. It's this weird cosmic horror type situation, and what I didn't like about it is I was very intrigued by why it was weird, what was happening, and I wanted answers to that, and you never get the answers. It's one of those, like, really ambiguous books with no real reasoning or ending, and I didn't like that. But if you are okay with things like that, I would highly recommend, because I do think the writing was pretty strong, and the first 60% had me until like I realized I wasn't getting answers. So there's this one. The next book I read for that vlog was The Never King. This was Rye's pick, and I'm not even really going to talk about this book because I just didn't like it. I ended up giving it 1 star. I had a horrible time with this book. I realized I don't like fantasy romance that is mostly smut. I like a slow burn with like 1 or 2 smut scenes at the end. Things like Never King don't work for me. This is a Peter Pan retelling where she just F's all the Lost Boys the entire time. That's all I'm going to tell you about it. I just really wasn't a fan, but if you are more of a smut reader, I think that you will like this. This book is really well loved. I am an unpopular opinion on it. We had an angle change because my battery died. If you are more of a smut reader than I am, you will like The Never King, probably. It's just a lot of smut, no plot. Then I read Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. This was Mel's pick for me, and I ended up enjoying this one. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't my all-time favorite. I had some issues with it, but I did have a fun time with it. I do like sci-fi horrors, so I will be recommending this. This follows our crew that end up investigating a haunted spaceship. You just kind of learn with them what happened on the ship and what maybe the reason is. My complaints for this was that I wanted to see our crew spiral into insanity, but you didn't really. Instead, you kind of just like had a flash forward, and I didn't really like that timeline jump. It kind of took a lot of what I was wanting out of the book from me, but I did really like our characters in it. I liked the idea. I wanted a little bit more spooky atmosphere, but I did enjoy lots of this, and I thought it had really big potential. I did enjoy the writing, although it was a little too descriptive for me. Our author tended to describe a lot about like what rooms looked like, which I think was to help set the scene, which I wanted to know when there was like blood on the walls, but I didn't care if the wallpaper was yellow, if that makes sense. But I do plan on continuing reading from this author. I had fun with this one, and I do recommend it. Yeah. And then the last one I read for that vlog was Nevernight by J. Kristoff. This was Kaylee's pick for me, and I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. I had some problems, which were mostly just the footnotes. I also complained about the slow pacing. I felt like it was a little bit slow, but the footnotes were just not needed, and some of them were like way too long. Like, there's footnotes in here that are half a page long, and that's just not needed, and they weren't necessary, and I think that they could have been worked into the narrative instead of being like this gimmick. And you know what I like? It's not even that I have anything against footnotes, because I've read books that have footnotes and enjoyed them. I just didn't feel like they were needed in this book to be so long. But Nevernight follows our main character, Mia, who ends up at a school for assassins. That's all I'm going to tell you. You kind of learn more about her magic, and her reasoning for being at the school as the story goes on. It's kind of a mystery at the beginning, so I don't really want to explain anything to you. Mia fits my favorite protagonist type of character. A female who is out for revenge, a female who is petty, a female who is brave, a female who is loyal, a female who is going to say, when the world tells her you cannot do this, she's going to tell you to F off and that she is going to do it. I loved that. I really liked the magic system in this. I liked the ideas of consequences to the magic. Every time you use magic, something happened. I really enjoyed a lot of the humor in this book. I think J. Kristoff has interesting prose, and I really liked it. Uses a lot of metaphors. I liked the metaphors, but I know it can be too much for some people. I really enjoyed this. I have a whole video series coming onto my channel. I have a spoiler series vlog coming for this at some point. So if you have not read the Nevernight series, I highly recommend doing that soon. This was a win for me, for sure. During the month, I also read Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent. This is a standalone that happens within the world of the Crowns of Nyaxia series, which is the Serpent and the Wings of Night world, but it is a complete standalone. It happens outside of that series, although the author's note does say that you will probably see these characters later on in the Crowns of Nyaxia series, so I do think you have to read this at some point, and it's not a complete standalone. This is a fantasy romance that follows our main character who joins the cult of a god that makes her lose her eyesight. The god takes your eyesight but gives you new sight, and you can then use the power of threads. And I thought the magic could have been really cool in this, but sadly, her not being blind just really irritated me most of the book. I ended up giving this a 3 star. I love, love, love Carissa's writing style and her prose, so that's really what saved this book, because I still enjoyed myself because I love her writing so much. But she ain't blind. If you're gonna give me blind rep, give me blind rep. Don't half-ass it. There was moments in this book where she literally describes things as seeing things. Like, she saw his mouth twitch at some point. If you're blind, you didn't see it, but you could have felt the movement of the threads, so you knew his mouth twitched or something like that. And it was just like little simple things that could have been fixed for me that would have made this a better book. I really didn't like our main character in the end. I don't think I actually finished telling you about what this is about, but we follow our main character, who's part of this cult, who is sent off on a mission to kill the vampire conqueror, and obviously falls in love. Like, obviously, it's a fantasy romance. I did enjoy him. He is brooding, but I think that this book missed the sass and the banter that the Serpent and the Wings of Night books had for me, but I still love this, and I love this cover. I think this cover is beautiful. Although I had complaints with this, I still really enjoyed it. I actually do want to read on in this series because this is like the coolest series because it's the Mortal Enemies to Monster Lovers series, which is like 6 different fantasy romance authors all wrote a book. The second book in the series is another standalone with different characters, different worlds, completely new, different author, and I just think that's intriguing. So I do want to try and continue on, but I will be probably reading those on KU. But yeah, I do recommend this. I think that if you like Carissa's writing, you may as well read this, and if you are less logically driven than I am, you'll probably like this more than I did, because it was just the logicalness of her being blind irritated me so much. And then I didn't really buy into the relationship that much, and I wanted more stakes and stuff, but I still enjoyed it. I still had fun with it. I'm still recommending it to people. And then we had Smut Den, which I have a Smut Den reading vlog on my channel where, you know what, I hung out in the Smut Den for 72 hours and I read fantasy romance. I've been in a fantasy romance mood and it's not stopping. Like, I still want to read more fantasy romance. I started the weekend off, let me move to the side. I started the weekend off with What Lies Beyond the Veil, which I ended up giving 3 stars. I liked it most. I buddy read it with a couple people and I liked it most out of anyone. I do see that in some ways it's a From Blood and Ash ripoff, but I still enjoyed it. I did like the banter in this, but I didn't feel like the banter related to their characters very much. And I think that that is something I struggled with a little bit throughout it, that like when they did do banter, it was good, but it didn't feel realistic to their characters and their character moments and who they were as people to be bantering like this to me. What Lies Beyond the Veil follows a world where there is a veil up that keeps Fae outside of the veil. And every year someone is sacrificed to keep this veil up, to keep the fairies, the fae, the big bads on the other side of the veil. When our main character is about to be sacrificed, she lets down the veil. And then she is marked by a fae, and the fae come to hunt her down. Obviously, there's a romance that happens as she's escaping from what is going on right now, and I don't want to say much more than that, but this book had really cool world building to me. I really liked the world building. I just never bought into the relationship completely. And it was very slow and at times boring. It was a very low 3-star for me. I get why no one else really liked it that much, but I didn't hate it because I really enjoyed the world building. The next book I read in this weekend was A Dawn of Onyx by Kate Golden. I had a really fun time with this one. This was 4 stars for me. This one we're following our main character who, when her brother steals from the enemy nation, she ends up giving herself up to the king as a replacement for her brother's life. She ends up asking if she can heal with her magical abilities in his army in order to pay off her brother's debt. And he says yes. And this is a enemies to lovers, full of fun banter, character moments that make sense to me, and I had a lot of fun with this one. I really enjoyed this one. There is some cool world building in this. I kind of wish we got more, but I think that this will follow a From Blood and Ash style world building, where we have a very naive character at the beginning, and as the book goes on, the world kind of opens up for her, but book 2 is where it like really opens up, so we get more of that world building in book 2, where book 1 was more about the relationship and the characters themselves. And I don't know, I had so much fun with the characters in this and the banter. The writing was a little juvenile. The side characters, the side character relationships were not good. I didn't believe any of those, but the, like, 2 protagonists that are falling in love, I loved them together. That is what made this a 4-star for me, because, like, that's why I read this book, was for the 2 that were falling in love, the fantasy romance element, and I liked the world building, and I liked the protagonists, so I could look past the crappy side characters. But I really recommend this. I want more people to read it. Book 2, I cannot wait for. I had so much fun with this book. The banter reminds me of, like, Hawk and Poppy. Like, it's such good banter. Pick it up. Then I read a book called Counterpart, and I had fun with this. It was not a fantasy romance, but I read it for a fantasy romance vlog, but I just would say it was more YA than fantasy romance. I loved the world building in this, which is why I had fun with it. I do not believe the romance at all that happens in it. It's very insta-love. There's no like character definition in the romance, but if you are looking for like one of the most intriguing and unique premises I think that I've read, I would recommend it. In this story, we're following our main character who is part of the king's family, but she is a counterpart. And what that means is that the king made a deal with the gods that every year blood will sacrifice blood of his, like his blood will sacrifice his blood in order to keep prosperity in the nation. So he has different types of children. He has the royal children, which is who he has with like the royal wives, and then he has the counterparts, which are the mistress's kids. Each royal children is paired up with a counterpart child, and they grow up together and they become friends, or they don't become friends, because it depends how each character handles their trauma, how they react to the situation, because at some point between the age of 16 and like 20, the royal kid will have to kill the counterpart kid in front of everyone. No matter how close you are, anything. It is a sacrifice for the gods. And we follow our character who's about to be sacrificed by her sister. And you just deal with so much trauma. Like, there's trauma everywhere in this book, and it's done so good. I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it. I loved the world building. I loved the idea of how this affects everyone. And I also liked the idea of, like, these counterpart kids aren't allowed to be able to survive, essentially, in the world. They're not taught how to read. They're never allowed to look at maps of anything. They're really kept secluded so that even if they were to escape, they would die, so that they don't even try to escape. And I thought that was a really interesting premise and unique, and if you are a YA reader specifically, I highly recommend this. But I mean, it wasn't the best book I've ever read, but it was intriguing and unique, and I liked that about it. Then I read Savage Lands by Stacey Marie Brown, and this was the end of my month, and sadly, this one was not a fan for me. I did not like this book. This is very well loved, so you might like it, but it's urban fantasy, which doesn't really work for me, and there was just a lot of crudeness for the sake of being crude. We had a lot of just, like, horny people that, like, why are you in jail and all you're doing is thinking about sleeping with someone? Why are you fighting for your life and you're thinking about how great this guy's eggplant would be in your coochie instead of trying to figure out how to kill him? Like, he's trying to kill you, you're about to die! During Smut Den, I really realized that I do not want smut on page until at least halfway through the story. I want a slow burn. I don't want smut for the sake of smut. I want my characters' sexual moments to make sense for them and the situations they're in. I'm not here just for, like, the clickbaitiness of, like, smut, if that makes sense. It kind of just, like, makes me cringe more than anything. And I think that that's just, like, why this book didn't work for me, is there's too much, like, sexual tension. But there's no sexual tension. There's just, like, sexual moments on page. Like, every 5 sentences is something sexual. There's, like, an innuendo, something like that. And that just doesn't work for me. I'm more here for a plot that builds a slow burn romance that leads to some really good smut scenes at the end of the story. Not just smut for the sake of smut, if that makes sense. I just didn't really love this one. And you can see all my thoughts in the 72-hour vlog. I'm not going to go on more about this. I gave it a 2 stars. I didn't absolutely hate my time with it, but I didn't love it either. So, yeah, that was my, sadly, end of the month. And there we go. That was the end of my month. And also, I still got trapped in the haunted house because the partiers were not first to escape. So I'm still stuck in there for another year, just partying away. But thank you to anyone who watched this video. Thank you to anyone who participated in 72 Hours in the Smut Den. Thank you to anyone who participated in Escape the Readathon. Participating in these community-based things makes having a channel more fun for me, and I really enjoy hanging out with all of you guys in sprints and in the Discords and doing things like that. So thank you so much for just being a part of my small little corner of the internet, or Lexi's little corner of the internet, because she's the one who put on Escape the Readathon. If you didn't know what Escape the Readathon is, I am going to link the announcement video down below. It is over, but I do think it'll happen again next year, and Lexi put a lot of work into it, so definitely go check out Lexi's channel. Thank you, Lexi, for asking me to host it. Yeah, and 72 Hours on the Smut Den. We run 72 hours every couple months, so there'll be another one coming up soon. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video, hanging out with me. If you made it all the way to the end of this video and you'd like to leave me an emoji just to say you were here, leave me the heart with, like, an arrow through it. I think that's, like, a crossbow or something, you know? Because I'm heartbroken by all my fantasy romance read, or Savage Lands. I'm heartbroken by not loving Savage Land. Anyways, if you'd like to connect with me on other platforms, my Bookstagram, my Book Twitter, my Goodreads, and my Patreon, all linked in the description bar below. Have yourself an absolutely remarkable day.